I still went around looking for more and more people and just never give up. I still remember the second time that I really found my co-founders, like the current co-founders, like Jasmine and Terrence, that has been with me for the last 7 to 8 years, was because I never gave up. I searched for them for about a year. I was just meeting people from all around because I still remember when I was reading about RedMart's story, they found each other on LinkedIn. So I just went on LinkedIn and sent out invites. like every day, like I was just sending out invites, like people from all walks of life and buying them drinks and, just having a chat, and none of those conversations worked out. So I guess it's more like unique to each individual.
Logan comes across as a founder who is not afraid of taking on the most arduous of tasks in his stride. He created his company, Eezee, nearly 8 years ago, with the simple premise of creating a better way to do procurement. The journey, like all great stories, is riddled with highs and lows, twists and turns, having navigated an industry well known for its archaic practices and workflows, but also traversing the expansion of his company into Indonesia, a move which has completely inflected his business. This episode illustrates a founder with a ton of grit, persistence, and as he quite aptly puts it, a mantra of just never giving up. We hope you enjoy it.
Logan, thanks for joining us on the first podcast.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to give viewers, listeners, a bit of an introduction as to what Eezee is?
So we provide an Amazon-like kind of procurement experience for large multinational, especially Fortune 500 companies.
Awesome. So let's maybe start with a bit of fun. JJ Forrest has really a beautiful way of explaining why he chose the name Rainforest.
Yep.
But I feel with Eezee, from what I've heard, the naming of the company wasn't so special. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I really like JJ's explanation about how he chose his name. Unfortunately, we didn't really have that of a cool story behind it. In fact, I think when we first had to brainstorm of our business name, right? We spent about 2 weeks trying to crack our brain around names. It's actually one of the hardest things that we have done when we first started. Like, we're just thinking about like what resonates with us. And then one day, one of my co-founder Darius, the initial one, actually went on we were just taking a bus with the Eezee link. Actually, we're just making procurement easy, right? Why don't we just do a wordplay, right?
Light bulb.
Yeah, just a wordplay around like Eezee. I was like, oh yeah, that's I think a fantastic idea because it's easy to pronounce. It's like, I think like they're just catchy, right?
Yeah.
And like we are making procurement simpler, so
It works.
Like it just clicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's more like a euphoria kind of moment.
Yeah.
For us.
Awesome.
2 weeks of brainstorming.
We always like to kind of start with like an origination story of the founder, early upbringings and that. What's the story of Logan?
We started Eezee in around October 2017. Prior to that, I spent about 7 years in corporate. So first 3 years in banking. So I was a former banker, corporate banking, and did that for about 3 years. Did well, but didn't really quite like the banking kind of lifestyle, the environment. I just didn't think that it was for me. So I left banking and went to join my family business, where I was the head of finance and procurement. And that's where it's the first time in a kind of like heavy operations kind of company, right? Where we had over 1,000 employees, and just buying as process is very complicated. And that's where I started to realize that there should be a simpler way to kind of like buy and sell stuff, right? Both on the buy end and the sell end. But if you think about how procurement has been, for the last 34 years, it has never changed, right? Just picking up phone, calling suppliers, and just doing it manually and keying in like purchase orders into your system. And when I still remember in 2015, there was like all this boom of e-commerce around Southeast Asia.
Yep.
Tokopedia, RedMart, Lazada, they are just raising a hell lot of money. And I was like, why isn't someone doing it for businesses? And we tried using Lazada and Shopee for our business, but it didn't quite work because like business buying behaviors are very different from B2B. And that's where like I kind of just think, oh, if no one is really interested in doing this, why don't, like, I know what people want. right? And I shop online, and I love the idea. I love the experience. I know what procurement people are thinking. So I just think, why don't I just marry both of this and just start a company solving this problem using e-commerce technology? And obviously here we are today. I think we have evolved quite a lot throughout this whole journey. I consider myself quite old in this, even though not the original.
It's
aged me.
Did you grow up in an environment of entrepreneurship? Was that something that then gave the spark, or what sort of triggered early on that idea that I may want to go build my own thing?
I think contrary to a lot of entrepreneurs, I didn't grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. I didn't have this dream. But fun fact is, my family, they are all a group of entrepreneurs. So if you talk about in Malaysia and Singapore, some of the, I would say some of the more well-known companies are run by my family. In recycling, in construction, and so on and so forth, logistics and whatnot. And I guess I was always surrounded by entrepreneurs, but that's not my dad. My dad was just an employee working for one of my uncle. When I reflect back around my journey, right, I always had this thinking around, why isn't my dad an entrepreneur? And I guess it stems from the fact that we didn't have a lot when growing up, but we had enough. Right? But I always compare with myself and my cousins, right? They're living in big houses, driving nice cars, going to good schools. And that inherently had some effects on me. And of course, growing up, after leaving banking, I was quite lost and went to work for my family business, and which employs 90% of my family members. So can you imagine that? And until the tail end of that moment, I still wasn't sure whether I was an entrepreneur, but I was just passionate about solving problems, right? I saw a problem there. I saw a large market opportunity, and I just went for it, right? And I would akin it more towards my own personal responsibility to kind of evolve this space because procurement has not been changing for the last 34 years. And I just had this internal conviction. So that drove me to become an entrepreneur. Just with the passion of solving problems.
Maybe can you set the scene for the listeners, just in terms of, from a category perspective, right? What you're solving for, what was the context or business workflow that has a ton of, pain points and fragmentation, and maybe expand on, what it is you're focusing on. So long tail, MRO, etc.
There are two types of procurement, right? There's direct procurement, which typically are commoditized kind of products. So in construction, we call them heavy machineries all the way up to maybe even cement, right? Or even building materials, where these are large volume, but maybe not so frequent kind of purchase because you purchase them on a project basis. But if you go into what we call indirect purchases, these are usually small value, high frequency products and largely fragmented. So when I first had this idea, I was every time I have to buy something unique that's not within a certain category, I have to contact a different supplier for it. So there is an office supply, there is a paper supplier, there is a leather supplier, and it's just the list goes on and on. There's probably more than 2,000 different suppliers out there. And if you look at a construction company, we literally buy anything, from bicycles all the way down to even buggy carts and whatnot. So that was the kind of category that we're focused on, where we're focusing on large volume, low value products that you buy on a daily basis. And with that repetition, you can actually use e-commerce as a way to ease into that, to ease the whole process, I guess. Yeah. So that's what we're solving for.
How did you kind of convince a team of people to want to solve for this problem?
So during the early days, I remember in 2016, it was just a bunch of friends sitting around, and I was just pitching to them the idea. And they are all my childhood friends that we grew up together, and we are all mostly in banking. But I don't think people understood the problem that I was solving for, right? And they didn't feel like it was their problem. I don't think it's a great idea to work with friends. So there's always a kind of expectation around it. So for me, how I would think about that it's just us drinking beer, and like I just tell them, hey, I have this idea and I think that I'm highly convinced that this will work out. And just gathering a bunch of them, and they just all said yes, because we're friends, right? So they want to support me on this journey. But if I reflect back, it's more like me pulling them along, right? Be always the one organizing for the meetups, because all of us had our full-time job, right?
Yep.
And we had to carve out time from our day-to-day to kind of do this. And most of us were getting married back then, having kids, so it's a nightmare. And then it wasn't the most like glamorous thing back then. So all that didn't quite work out for us. Eventually, I still went around looking for more and more people, and just never give up. I still remember the second time that I really found my co-founders, like the current co-founders, like Jasmine and Terrence, that has been with me for the last 7 to 8 years, was because I never gave up. I searched for them for about a year. I was just meeting people from all around, because I still remember when I was reading about RedMark's story, they found each other on LinkedIn. So I just went on LinkedIn and send out invites. like every day, I was just sending out invites, like people from all walks of life, and buying them drinks, and just having a chat. And none of those conversations worked out. So I guess it's more like unique to each individual. That LinkedIn didn't work for me.
What are the traits you look for though? I mean, like if I think of our portfolio and even the conversations that we've had, I mean, I can think of a company, Go One in Australia, whereby they all went to school together. They then went away to do some university and other activities, and they all came back together in Australia, and the rest is sort of history. But obviously your first crack at it had some wobbles, but then you had to find kind of a new team. Like, what were the traits that worked well for you?
I guess it's a sense of like commitment, right? Like that's always the most important, right? Is actually like I find finding a co-founder very similar to marriage. But it's much more complicated than that, because you have multiple parties, and you always have to take care of each other's interests, right? But as that blossom, you don't even have to talk to each other frequent, and you know what each other is thinking about.
Sure.
So like commitment, I would say, is the number one kind of factor. But obviously it's much more complicated than that. Back then I also like a first time founder, right? It wasn't clear to me that I needed to look out for certain factors. And my friends, obviously, they were my friends for certain reasons. So we kind of clicked and have similarities, but we have never worked together before. So I guess if like I were to restart, I would look for people that have worked before and kind of like the similarities in terms of working style, then do this together with them rather than just using friends and going from there.
Do you remember the first official day one of Eezee?
Official day one? Honestly, it's a blur. I think it was somewhere in 2016. Okay, if really official day one, if I remember, it's April of 2016. Because that's why I remember it is because it's our incorporation date. But we didn't really do anything, right? So my first idea is, because my kind of style is, if I want to do something, I'll just get started, get working, get cracking at it, right? So I went to incorporate the company even before I round up my investor, my like whoever that's out there, like co-founders, split the shareholdings and whatnot. So I remember it was 16 or April 2016, by a shell company for some time, and took me obviously 1.5 years to kind of get things going.
How did you think through building an MVP at the start? I mean, but what was the composition as well as that, that founding team? Did you have the technical capabilities to be able to execute on a fairly capable MVP? So
it's a good question. I've been stuck in this dilemma that you always need a technical co-founder. Of course, you want to build a great company, you will need like at the start. But I think it's fairly important for the original idea to be to get started, to really get cracking at like the problem itself. So the answer is yes, we had an original co-founder that was like technical in nature, but because I knew nothing about technicalities, right, of like building a website or technology or coding development and whatnot. So he told me what I just treat everything that he tell me as truth. And back then we were leveraging on WooCommerce, building our website on top of it. But it took a long time to get things like going, and he was eventually using a third party, I would say, software development house to build on it and customizing a lot. So in terms, there's a lot of costs. It's slow in building, and obviously like that's not the best way to scale like in terms of the platform. So eventually we had to restart. How I restart was I just remember going on YouTube, searching how to build like a website or an e-commerce website, right? And I remember I spent about 8 hours just not learning, but just stopping at every single point and then clicking whatever the YouTube is like doing. Just replicating what the YouTube is doing, right? So I was just like, okay, I got to get this out like within a day. So that's what I did. 8 hours on that, and the next time the website is up. And in fact, that shocked me because I didn't know that it was so easy to create a website. So kudos to like WooCommerce and whatnot. I mean, like technology has evolved like to an amazing like acceleration rate, right? Yeah.
How did you validate that kind of early MVP though? So, is the context that it was launched in Singapore, you had some early customers, what did they look like?
My idea was very simple. We didn't really have the complication that we have now, but the idea was that back then, if I put the products that businesses will buy, naturally I'll attract business buyers, right? So that was the start. So I didn't really like customize heavily on what business needed, like our integration with ERP, all that didn't exist. And because I was in this trade, I actually onboarded a few of my business suppliers on board. So for the first 3 months, there was really nothing going on. And then subsequently, we received the first order. And then subsequently, 1 order a month, 1 order a week, become 1 order a day. That's just by me doing an 8-hour kind of YouTube video. So like that was when I realized that we were onto something. But back then, we still had our full-time job. So myself, I was still working for my family business, right? But when it became an order a day, I knew that in order for me to build this up to a bigger company and like really solve this problem, right, I needed to be on full-time. And that's why I decided to quit my full-time job with my family and go on to build this business full-time. But that's that, yeah.
Did you have any reservations? Because I think I've heard another interview with you where you've talked about the startup journey being one of the loneliest journeys.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when even before I found like Jasper and Terrence, right? I remember when I had the decision to kind of come out full time to do this. So I had a conversation around my initial co-founders. All of them literally drop out like almost on that day itself. So I tell them, okay, if I were to do this full time, all of us, you're either 100% in or you're out, right? So I remember we had about 5 of us, three of them drop out. So, and some like on a good terms, some didn't on good terms. And the only one remaining was actually Darius. So Darius stuck through with me. But even then, he had to go back to his family business in Malaysia. So there was a timeline towards that. I remember it was about 3 months. So he told me like he would stick through me with me for about 3 months. But after that, he had to go back to help his family business. So can you imagine that like I was just alone again. And that's where I got on this journey of like going on LinkedIn, connecting with people, and just trying my best to get out there and get to meet more people. How I actually got to know my like current co-founders like Jasper and Terrence was I just remember I was sitting in the car park one day, and I was at this like split road where I decided it's either I can find a co-founder so I can continue or I don't. Because back then the decision making was that we already had a website that's having constant clients, but I obviously can't do this alone. And the website was breaking. because it's a 8-hour YouTube video kind of website, right? So it's breaking like it was laggy. Imagine going to a website, it takes about 5 seconds to load.
Yeah.
That's the original website. I was like, how do I do this? I can't build a marketplace without a technical co-founder. And I know that it's not going to be built on WooCommerce, right? So I remember scrolling my contact list. So that I don't know why I did that. It's just me feeling bored and just scrolling my contact list and me thinking, okay, who would know someone that knows how to code? So I landed on this lady called Joanne. She used to be incubation manager at one of my former school that I studied in. And I thought, oh, if like anyone would know someone that codes, it's probably someone that works in the school, right? And I texted her. Immediately, I get a reply that say, I know someone. Someone actually came to me yesterday looking to find a business co-founder. So it's like, holy shit, like I've been waiting for this moment for the last like don't know how many months, going through like meetings after meetings and nothing worked out, right? And it's just that I don't know how to explain that moment. It's just all the stars aligned. From then on, we had just 2 calls. 2 calls, 1 meeting. Within a week, we signed an agreement to be co-founders.
Wow.
So it's really like dating, right? You know, like you can date so many girls, right? But you meet the right one, you know that you meet the right one. So there's no explanation around that.
And so was that an inflection point? I mean, did things start to really accelerate from there when you'd sort of found the one, so to speak?
Yes. Honestly, they taught me more than I taught them. Like in terms of leadership, in terms of how we built the company, in terms of the cultural element. I still remember the first thing that they asked me when we signed the agreement. Jasper and Terrence actually came to me and said, hey, like, bro, you should like really think about how we want to build this company, how we want to hire, who we want in this company. And that like was something I never thought about.
Right.
But they were the one that like came to me and said, hey, you should think about this. And they really look up to me in terms of like, because they say like we will be the one that set the tone of the company, set the culture, and etc. etc. And it was an inflection point because I'm a hard worker, but until I meet them, like they just blew it out of the park. Like I've never met someone that doesn't really sleep. You know, they sleep less than 5 hours a night. That works as hard as me. We work for the first 3 years. We worked through like weekends, holidays, even Chinese New Year for the first 3 years, right? And if I didn't have Jasper and Terrence, I don't think I would have put through. And I don't think that I would have put in those insane hours together with them, because it's like you kind of infect each other in terms of like the work ethics, right? And because we have put in so much energy and so much time into this, it felt like the momentum was right. And you cannot let this fail, right? So you had this sense of responsibility against each other to keep each other accountable. So the harder they work, the harder I work. And the more like we all want this to fail because we are putting so much energy into this, right? So like we just carry on regardless of like the multiple rejections or, you know, from clients, from investors and whatnot. And then just continue on, right? So it was the inflection point, to be honest. In fact, now that I realize after you asked.
So talk to us about that early journey towards PMF, because one of the questions we like to ask founders is, was it a very disciplined approach to sort of saying, well, we know that PMF looks like this, or was it an iterative process? And I guess, you know, part B to that question is, how do you know you have PMF?
Wow, I think product market fit is a very, very big word, right? So to be honest, like I do think that we have product market fit, and I do think that we have multiple clients that have the similar kind of pain points that I described earlier, right? But it's always evolving because your product's evolving, your business is evolving,
right?
Your customers is also evolving, right? Their problem statements are evolving on a daily basis. So like I don't really have a very detailed breakdown, but if I were to backtrack into the day that we realized that we have the product market fit, was getting the right products on the marketplace, having the right suppliers, and drawing in the type of customers that we want.
Right.
Eventually, when we built this business, I remember in 2019, Shell reached out to us. So Shell reached out to us to say, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I saw the About Us and we want to explore more with you guys. And we started to realize that Fortune 500 companies are the kind of companies that we want to serve because they understood the problem statement. Obviously, they are large enough, like kind of procurement span, and they want everything digital. Whereas if you look at the SMB space, they're more out of, if you have the product I can't find anywhere else, I'll come to you. But if you have better price somewhere else, they will take a taxi down to that somewhere else to buy, right? So they are not exactly the kind of customer profile that we want to go after. Maybe not now, but maybe in future, right? And then as we, as Shell reached out to us, we realized that was the ideal customer profile. So they taught us like that. And I remember we raised our seed round with Insignia, and we just say, hey, we are going after all the Shell in the world, right? And there we are. So that was also the point where we clicked. And that's where we decided that our product market fit is Fortune 500 companies with large operations across Southeast Asia. And we want to be that united platform, that one single point of contact, one single kind of platform for them to purchase all their tail end spend, right? So that was the part where how I would define product market fit even up to today. And even up to today, our product is still evolving, right? Quite at a very big way, right? Yeah. So
how did you think about fundraising? I mean, you mentioned Insignia seed round.
Yeah.
How long did you guys bootstrap? When did you think about raising capital? How did you figure out it was the right time? What was the decision matrix there?
I didn't really plan all this fundraising because when I first started the business, I put in the capital, my own money into this business, all my savings. I still remember when we first started, I didn't know you can use other people's money to kind of grow a business. So that was like, whoa, shit. Yeah, I can use people's money. That is insane, right? Like when I first started, I was just like, okay, if I believe in this business, and I'm the only one that have worked before, right? My other two co-founders, like Jasper and Terrence, they're fresh out of poly. So they have never worked before. They're not from good family background. So obviously I can't get anything from them, right? I just put in my own money into this and bootstrap from 2017, I remember, late 2017 all the way to mid of 2019.
Wow.
How we eventually get there was that I remember we were at an event, I think it was Switch event in Singapore, right? And there was this investor that came up. We are still very good friends up to today. He was the one that taught me everything. So it's my secret hack to all the understanding the investor's mind. And it's like, so his name is Edwin from Berda. He's still there, by the way, after so long. And he was the one that told me, asked me out for a coffee. I was like, this investor asked me out for coffee. I was like, what do you do? Like, they invest people's money. He was like, okay. Then he asked me whether obviously he liked the business model and he liked how I actually explained the problem and what kind of customers do we have. So he said one day, just say, hey, why don't you just consider raising a seed round, right? I think there will be investors that will be interested. And he taught me everything. So literally I sit, I think I'm exaggerating, but what I remember is 1 month below his office at a Starbucks, doing my forecasting, doing my presentation slides, everything. And every day he will come down every hour, for 1 hour a day to just go through with me okay, what's working, what's not working, what should we adjust, until the last, I think towards the tail end of that month, he was just okay, forecasting is good, presentation slide is good, but it doesn't gel. There's no story behind it. Then I was like, what are you talking about? What's this story? I was like, okay, we need to work on your story. So he brought me up to his team and I was pitching in front of his team. Then they were giving me live feedback on what should I adjust in terms of my story and whatnot. So, and finally I was ready, right? So he said, okay, I think you're ready to go out. But before you go out, like you need to follow a process. I was like, what? There's a process to follow. So it's like, okay, you have to start, like you have to go out, have coffee for 1 month. I was like, okay, during that coffee for 1 month, you try to gauge interest. Those that are interested, you list them down. And then when you start and end within a certain period of time. So you control the kind of like narrative around it. So I really owe it to him. And that was, I would say, the best fundraising experience I had. Because seed round is the easiest, right? In a way, we had revenue, we had growth, we have almost everything back then. And timing was just right. I think back then was still in the second phase of or third phase in this whole VC scene in Singapore. So I think it was relatively matured. It's quite easy to approach investors.
Yeah.
And that was that, right? And yeah, here we are today.
Yeah, let's do a gear shift to today. And what does Eezee look like, right? What are we talking about in terms of customer logos, markets of operation, etc.?
Obviously, we evolved quite a bit. So if you backtrack in Singapore is a very small market, right? Everyone knows this. But we knew that it is a good sandbox for us to start in. When we first landed Shao's contract, so that was quite lucky that we got that. We knew that we wanted to go after similar logos, similar to Shell. So there's only 2 other refineries in Singapore, Exxon and Chevron. So we went after them. Then COVID hit, right? Obviously that slowed down a bit, but it was a much easier conversation because when you had Shell and you go to Exxon and say, hey, Shell is using us, immediately things will go, right? We'll get the approval, we get on board. And then we expand by category. So we got into another company called Sazel. It's an aerospace company. And we did the same thing, right? We got Sazel and then we went to the fellow kind of similar companies in aerospace and just say, hey, Sazel is using us. Why don't you do that with us now? So we got Rolls-Royce, Airbus, etc. Some big and some obviously much smaller. As we expand across to other markets like Indonesia and Philippines, and Malaysia as well, it kind of evolved quite a bit because Singapore's market dynamic and industry vertical is very different from Indonesia. So Indonesia, we have large mining giants like Vale, Adaro Energy. You have also agriculture giants like Cargill, Syngenta, etc. So we have kind of evolved through that process and gotten all these customer logos. But it's because we know exactly what pain point we're solving, right, for them. And who to target, what's the client profile, what kind of problems are we solving, and how do we provide a solution around that, right? So that's the customers' logos that we have as of now.
How would you explain the commercial model as it stands right now? How does it work from a monetization perspective?
Predominantly, we have a very kind of margin kind of business where for every single transaction through our platform, we take a cut, right? It ranges from 5% all the way up to 20%. And then obviously now we are in around average of about 15% as of now. So that's the business. But we have always tried several other business kind of solutions that we tried SaaS. I think you guys know. Didn't really work quite well. I think Southeast Asia is still not that matured for SaaS as of now. So we just leave it there. Anyway, it's low-hanging fruit that we have. So we have a small SaaS product. We have evolved also our product vertical into services. So we have this pay on behalf service that we have that's growing very well. That's also on the note that we are solving our customers' problem and kind of think about how we can charge around it. But in the end, it's just charging a margin off every single transaction that we have. Yeah.
Founders in commerce always get is the Indonesia story, right? There's always this pull that, especially on the B2C side of things with Lazada and Shopee, must win Indonesia. Was Indonesia just a pull for you guys? You knew you had to go there at some point, or were there other kind of pull factors?
Honestly, Indonesia was not our first choice, to be honest. It was in fact more of Malaysia because we are, it's easy for us to kind of just go to Malaysia, right? And most of the suppliers actually do have some presence in Malaysia. So it was an easy choice for us. But how we thought about Indonesia was because Indonesia, I actually did a market study around Indonesia and realized that there was about 67% of the economy that's being powered by industrial activities. So you talk about like mining, you talk about like agriculture, automotive, factories building up. And it just felt like a no-brainer for me, right? If large percentage of the economy is being led by industrial activities, naturally there will be more activities there around procurement. And especially if you talk about like Fortune 500 companies there. So when we landed there, it was more of a top-down approach. Looking at the market, the macro effects of it, and then going in. But it wasn't our number one choice. In fact, we first expanded to Malaysia. And then like when we were there, things just worked out, right?
What are the complexities you think between like operating in, say, a Singapore versus an Indonesia? I know that's like a really basic question because I know there's probably a ton, right?
Yeah. It's honestly polar opposite in terms of culture, in terms of like the way they do business. So let's talk about like business in general. I think one thing I've learned over time is my customers in Indonesia, like we do business outside of office. So we have like coffee, we have lunch, and then like business get done. Right. But if you go to Singapore, they don't even want to see you in person. Because the procurement will be thinking, like maybe someone is might be reporting it to their bosses and whatnot. So Singapore, they are very careful. They are very cautious and they are very protective around how they're seen around their suppliers, right, or their partners. They don't want to be seen as biased or to have some sort of relationship. But in Indonesia, it's entirely different. So just the business context itself. And if you go down to people, right, people by itself, how they work is also different, right? But end of the day, I say that Asian DNA doesn't go away. You need to spend time with them. You need to talk to them. You need to understand what clicks for them, right? So that's how I would try to simplify the entire experience.
It's been a fairly lengthy journey already when you consider it with Eezee, and you've probably learned so much. Like, what are some of the things now that keep you up at night? Like, what are the things that really kind of stress you still as a founder, or maybe the different things than what was earlier on in Eezee's journey?
I think things have gotten a lot better since we started. But I remember the first time I had a crisis was during a time where we were growing. That wasn't the time that we knew that we can actually fundraise from people. So we were growing, but we were running out of cash because we were giving credit terms to clients, right? So I didn't really understood like the cash flow impact to the company. Then I was like, but I need to continue growing to serve our customers, but my cash is running out. So there's this conundrum that I was stuck in. I remember not sleeping much for that, I think 2 to 3 months. And we had an angel coming in to kind of like, it was also a euphoria moment. But that was the initial time that we were running out of money, we were growing, and I didn't know how to solve this problem because I didn't know I can use other people's money to solve this problem. Up to today, I would say people is the most challenging problem that I ever have. Like whether is it internally or externally, dealing with people. And I think that there was once an advisor actually told me this, that people don't look up to you as a CEO. They look up to you and expect a God. So you are expected to be godlike, meaning you're expected to bring the same energy, the high energy to office every single day. You're expected to solve all the problems, blah, blah, blah. And I think that expectation and that responsibility actually weigh heavily, even though I have co-founders. And that helps a lot because my co-founders really, like we are on kind of like the same frequency. But it weighs heavily on me because knowing that people join me for with that expectation, and people like obviously want also financial benefit out of this like whole journey, I have to continue portraying that like godlike figure and always trying to be in my best self, right? Is this whole stress, expectation from people, from customers and whatnot, that drives this like whole sleepless night. Yeah, always thinking about how I can improve myself, right?
Where's Eezee in 10 years?
For us, my dream obviously is beyond Southeast Asia. We want to build a platform where customers can actually buy from us anywhere, right? So my ambition, of course, is to grow it beyond Southeast Asia to like places like even Korea, Japan, India, China, US, and even Europe, where I envision a world where Fortune 500 companies, regardless of where they operate in, they just use a single platform for all their indirect spend, right? And that's what I envision. I don't think we'll reach there in 10 years.
Yeah.
But I think that like it's a baby step towards that process. We are now in 4 countries. We hope to bring this experience to even more countries because we have customers telling us that we are much better than like other platforms that's out there operationally and as well as technology-wise. So yeah, that's what I envision.
So you're a very seasoned founder, and we've got a lot of early stage founders listening or watching. What would be some final words of advice or learnings that you could instill on them?
One of the common things that I see in early stage founders is they rely too much on external funding, right? They are being attracted to doing a business or solving a problem for the wrong reasons, right? Because 90% of the early stage founders that I talk to, or maybe have some form of interaction, always ask me about VC funding. But my advice is that if you build a great business, they'll come. Right? And no matter how long you take, but end of the day is finding that fit, solving a customer's problem, and building just like a decent business, right? A great business that people want to put money in. I think early stage founders lack that, convictions internally. They're like, oh, if I can't raise money, I'll just go back to work. But that's not the reason you should start a business.
Totally.
That's what I will give a parting word to early stage founders. Yes.
Awesome. Logan, thanks for joining us on the first podcast.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks for having me.